let's jump to the vocals. So this kid Gage, he's great. He's got, I think he's got a cool voice. I think he has a similar voice to like Chester from Linkin Park, where he can sing really clean, he can have a little gravel. So he has a good style, and that's why one of the reasons why I like this band and I like what they do. With someone like this, let me see what we're using here.
Sometimes I sit and think about how long it's been since we were all so young.
So with Gage, I believe we're using the SM7 to track these vocals. It's a great vocal for someone who sings strong, got a good powerful voice. Important thing for me as vocals is compression. I record with compression. I love distressors. I love my retro compressor. That's great too. I like to kind of slam those vocals going in, but not suck the life out of them. There's a difference between that. It's using good compressors and using them properly. They will keep things exciting. You look at my chain, my vocal has the most plugins out of all my stuff. I start here. Wow, I've got 2 de-essers on. It's kind of redundant, but I started with a de-esser. Maybe I didn't like a little bit of the high end that he had. Jump to an EQ. To me, you don't want the rumble, so you'll notice that I'm rolling everything off under 100. I don't really need it. A lot of stuff you listen on the radio, they're rolling off way further up. It's preference, personal preference. I want him to sound as big as possible, so I don't want to take too much of that bottom end out of there. Let me get some water. A lot of times, too, when I am mixing, once I build that music, an important thing to me is having powerful music. And you listen to bands like Rage Against the Machine or Nirvana or bands like that, and there's a power to their music. So I always start and get that music as powerful as I can. I'll do some rides on snare drums or toms or rooms, whatever I need to do. But to me, I like to get this really good bed of music first. Once I get that bed and I'm really comfortable with it, that's when I start to add the vocal. Because to me, there are 2 elements. There are 2 elements of this thing. And the vocals are what really brings it all together. But that music, if you don't have a good bed of powerful music and you put the vocals on there, you're just going to have a weaker sort of sound. So to me, that's how I do that. So I take this vocal, and it's just, I mean, I know I use a lot of times the same kind of mics, but some people's voices have different frequencies that aren't as good. So you listen and you pay attention and you say, hey, I don't like that. Maybe you could tell I didn't like the 620 hertz on his voice, so I rolled a little bit of it off, not too much. And then I get into compression. I love these 1176s. They're great for vocals. So you'll notice that I like to keep my attack slow and my release fast on these ones because I want him to, I don't want to put it too slow so I lose the push and pull. I want the compressor to almost pump a little bit, not too much, but pump a little bit to add excitement. And you'll notice here, I'm using 2 back-to-back, the same compressor. Why is he using it twice? Well, one wasn't doing it for me, so I needed a second one. A lot of times I'll use an SSL EQ and compression because I like the way the SSL sounds. With this case, Warren asked me not to use that, so I'm using this, and it's just, it's just finding your way within those compressors is really what it is. And you see here, I'm EQing a little bit more, rolling some bottom end off towards the end, and then finally I'm getting to a de-esser, and I probably had too much in it, so I pulled it out. You'll notice my lead vocal it's all comped. Like I said, I don't edit in mixing. I comp everything. I tune everything that I need to tune. You'll notice when you solo this up, you'll probably hear a little tuning.
Sometimes I sit and think about how long it's been since we were all so young and all the stupid things we've done.
He's a good singer, so I wasn't that aggressive with him. If you use autotune a lot, you can hear it in there. If you don't, it will just sound natural when you play with the music, I believe. So I'll take that, I will tune it, I'll comp it first, then I'll tune it, and then I'll consolidate it, and in your case, I throw everything away so you don't have to deal with it anymore. I don't actually throw it away. I keep it in case the singer says, hey, Cameron, you missed something, or you're off a note, or you messed something up. I'm pretty careful, so I don't get a lot of that, but occasionally I do. So to me, be smart about comping your vocals, tuning your vocals. Think about this. If you were to hand this to someone else, you wouldn't want them to comp your vocals, because what if they chose the wrong take? So to me, even though I know I'm mixing this, what if one day I wasn't around to mix this? I wouldn't want someone else to choose wrong. So I'm going to make those choices as a producer and say, hey, this is my job. My job is to do this, this, and this. I'll play it for the artist. If he doesn't like it, we'll change something. But chances are I'm pretty in depth in what it should be, and I know what these people are looking for because we talk, we communicate, and spend time together. You notice that I had a double on this. This double in this case is the same microphone. Not using as much effects on here, just a little bit of compression, not much, a little bit of EQ. The reason is I'm not going to use this track very much. I'll use it in the chorus to lift a little bit, but you'll notice that in the verses I graded out because I muted it because I don't want it there. So we're going to pull it out, even though he sang the whole song this way. If we jump back to the lead vocal for a second, you'll notice that I'm using a couple sends here, and we have 3 sends. If we go down to the bottom is kind of where a lot of times I keep my reverbs, delays, stuff like that. So I've got a couple things. I got a micro. Okay, there's one flaw to my mix. I used micro pitch shift on this mix, which is not a stock Digi plugin. I apologize. So if you don't have that, I'm sorry. You could probably mute it and it won't make a lot of difference, but I am using that. The other thing, I'm using a little bit of reverb. Hate to say this, I'm using the stock Digi, and I'm using the plate. It looks like a large plate with a pretty slow decay. This case, no pre-delay. Sometimes I use pre-delay, just depends on the band. Using a little bit of that, and then it looks like I'm also going to a delay right here, which for you guys I'm going to organize and put them all down here. And normally I would organize them in order of their busing. So that's 5 and 6, is 15, 16, just to try to keep things organized. Minimal effects on the vocals.
At the thinner the herd, we never listen to a single word they'd say to us.
Okay. Along with everything else, I'll build the song. I would usually have all these other vocals gone for now. They'd be muted. And I'll mix this lead vocal. I'll mix the lead vocal to a level that I like.
Sometimes I sit and think about how long it's been since we were all so young and all the stupid things we've done. The older we get, the thinner the herd.
Now, a funny thing about mixing is there's no rules. There's no one way to do things. And when I take a vocal like Gage's and I'll listen to the song all the way through, you look here, I don't even have a single ride on this vocal. In this situation, I thought it sat great the whole time. Occasionally I'll have to go up and down with these vocals, and when I have that, when you put a lot of automation on these things, it starts to get more complicated. Now, when I say it's more complicated, say I had a bunch of automation on this, now I want to just raise it up a little bit. There's lots of ways to do it. You can go in and you can take the volume trim, and then you can trim this up a little bit. But sometimes you have automation on the volume trim. Yeah, you can also select it all and move it up and down, and it moves the whole thing. But a lot of times it's actually easier for me to just jump into the plugins, and whatever that last plugin is I have, is just take the output and raise it up and down a little bit. So to me, it's kind of an easier way just to get around and keep things simpler and quicker for me. After I get the lead vocal settled, then I just start putting in harmonies. You see, you've got a stereo track of harmonies, same mic, same everything, digging out some frequencies I don't like, taking out bottom end because I don't want that rumble to hit. You notice I'm panning them hard left, hard right. I want when those harmonies to come in, I want it to spread. I want a stereo spectrum. I want the lead vocal to hold the center, and I want those to take the outside. It's really not a lot to say about what I'm doing right there. It's very simple. It's just add it in, blend it in there. Then we get to our woes. So we got a bunch of woes here. We got a lot of woes. We got a lot of woes and gangs. And you look at them all, and you look at their levels. They're all pretty much about 8.2, minus 8.2. I don't need anything complicated or fancy. It's just, let's put them up, listen. What sounds good? Let me just listen for a second. I'll solo these guys up.
Whoa! Whoa!
You can hear a lot of autotune, or a little bit of autotune in there. When you put them all together, it should be a little less noticeable. You can tell that with these, I'm also bussing. I got a woe sub, so all these woes are going to another group right here, keeping it close to the woes like I always do. Once again, you look at the EQs that I'm using. You'll see that on the individual tracks, I'm rolling off the bottom end. Why do I roll it off here too? I don't know why. All I know is that what if I forgot to EQ one, or I probably just naturally do that. If it were to sound too filtered, I would know right away and I would back it back off. But in general, I'll kind of go to this sort of roll off sort of feel. And then I'll just choose like, hey, is it popping out enough? Do I need to brighten it up? You see, I pull out a little bit of mid-range, add a little bit of high-end. And it's mainly Gage that looks like is singing these parts. I want to see what this gang one is. Okay, so this is kind of funny. You listen to that, and that sounds a little bit out of tune. It is, because it's a group of people. Those are gangs. You'll notice they're turned down a little bit lower than the other ones, but sometimes that dissonance, when you put it in a blend of stuff, it doesn't sound so off. It sounds interesting. So, yeah, if you solo things, there's flaws, but sometimes it's not about that. To us, we just went in there. We did it all in a day. We did it fast. Towards the end of the day, we said, go in there and do some woes. So the band went and did woes. It probably was Gage. It was probably Sean. It's probably AJ in there together. And AJ and Sean aren't really singers, but they can hold a decent melody. So a little flawed is what it is. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be overly picky on it. You'll notice here at the bottom of these woes, there's also another one. It says woes ha, W-O-A-H. It just... So you listen to that and you're like, whoa, it's a little wild. So what that is sometimes when I start to get too many tracks going on, when I'm editing, I say, you know what, it's going to be a mess when I'm mixing if I'm dealing with 100 tracks. So I'm in a subgroup stuff. So you could tell there, I probably took 10, 12 vocals and tuned them up and then blended them. So what I did is I kind of submixed. I submixed these things. So later on, it's just an easier push and pull. It's not like grouping a bunch of things. It's not EQing a ton of stuff. It just saves me time and effort so I can focus on the song in general.
Next, we'll dive into the vocals and kind of talk about how I treated those for the mix. If you remember during tracking, we had the luxury of testing out a couple of different microphones with Lily when we were recording, and we all kind of came to a I think it was fairly close. We all agreed on the same mic at the end, which I believe was the Lewitt 940. And for Lily's voice, we had that. She has kind of a bitey character in her kind of mid-range area, right around the 2K area. And of all the mics we put her on, the Lewitt seemed to still complement her the best, but also keep that range at bay. Kind of tamed her down a bit. And you'll see even in the mixing process, we still had to be aggressive in that range with her. It's just, I think, one of the inherent parts of her voice. She just has that in there. So if we had more time and a lot more microphones to choose, maybe we would have found something that was even better, that would really have helped even more. But with the mics that we did have access to, I think we all kind of felt like that 940 was the best candidate for her. So that being said, definitely had to be very conscientious of that sort of 1.5 to 4K range on her. That seems like that can get pretty bitey with her. So with her lead, once again, you've seen this, probably the two most used compressors on this mix, I would argue, would be that DBX 160 and then the Klanghelm, this MJUC. I just like it on vocals because it's just such a good, smooth sounding vocal compressor. It can be really versatile, and for a lot of different applications. But on vocal, I just like it because it seems like it just can kind of even things out in a real natural way. So we play a little bit of her vocal here. Oh, hang on a second. I think we have the vocal subgroup muted. Yep, we do. Here we go.
There must be something that you need. Maybe that something is me. Maybe we had too much to drink, yeah.
I can get pretty aggressive with this compressor, knocking down 10 dB, and it's not necessarily overly pumpy or breathy and that type of thing. It just kind of keeps her in place. So
there must be something that you need. Maybe that something is me. Maybe we had too much to drink, yeah. Or maybe that's what we need.
just does a real good job, I think, of keeping things sounding nice and even and steady. From there, I like to do de-essing right away before I start EQing, because I find that if you can tame some of the peaks that jump out first, then you can do an overall EQ after the fact, after these other things have been tamed and they don't jump out at you. So I know there's a lot of really good de-essers out there, and newer de-essers. I'm still kind of rocking the RD-esser, but it's such a good de-esser. And I've been using it for a long time and like it a lot. So, but I try to do that right before I start doing any real major EQing, because I feel like it's important to get some of those sibilant things tamed before you start adding in other EQ and things like that, because then the sibilants can really start getting out of control. So if you tame it first, you kind of start with something that's a little more even, and then you can kind of shape around that. So from there, I'm using this multiband, this C6, and
there must be something that you need. Maybe
you'll see I'm kind of really hitting the that mid-range area that I was talking to you about, the like that 2K to 4K range. Really pushing down on that, and a little bit in the low mids too. Getting a little warm in that area, a little murky in that area. So I decided that this would be better than just trying to EQ all that out. Make it be a little more of a dynamic compression thing to help it still sound natural, but not just completely scoop out some of this information. And then you can see up here too, I've got this high shelf going, which is also acting as a sibilance control. So it's almost a little bit like double de-essing. I've got the RD-esser going, but then also using this this band here to control some of that sibilance. some of that kind of real squeaky stuff up there that's just can get out of control real quick.
I should drink, yeah. Or maybe that's what we need.
So then after I've got kind of the dynamics and some of that frequency stuff in place, I added a little bit of EQ here. Ended up still feeling like those low mids were a little too much, so I did end up pulling that down up 2.5 dB, or excuse me, 3.5 dB. But we still had enough of there was enough there, and this was kind of riding it well, but I still needed to pull out a little bit more, I guess. And then I did do the dip here as well in that 2 to 4K range. And now that it's been tamed, I feel like a lot of times you can take an EQ and now push that area up. If you're riding it the whole time, sometimes it can get lost, but you can take that ride now that it's been evened out in this riding it, you can actually do an overall boost. And this is very subtle. This is like not even, just a little above 0.5 dB, so it's not much. Because she, once again, that range for her can get real bitey real quick. So I don't think this is the most polished vocal sound. It's definitely not a super clean and bright vocal sound, but I think where I ended up getting the track to being this, sort of dirty and rock vibe, I felt like the vocal was in that same realm, rather than trying to really make it a super shiny Windex, wipe it off, make it really bright and crystal clear and clean. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more not so pretty, if you will. So a little bit of looks like a little bit of boosting here at 8, trying to get a little bit of the upper stuff back after it's been compressed and pushed down with this C6 up here in this upper area. Using the Pultec and getting kind of that Pultec vibe on it. And then at some point in the mix, after getting all the elements in and getting the vocal put in, I went and grabbed another EQ. And look at this, I'm deciding that this was still too much of that mid-range that starts to hurt. So I started pulling that down even more. In hindsight, I probably could have gone back up to this one, taken that out, and done the adjustments here. But sometimes when you're in the middle of a mix, you just kind of want to start with where you're at, and it's probably easier for me to just grab this EQ and go on and put this in right here. So that's kind of the treatment for the lead vocal. After that, I don't think this was probably, I was trying to be a little more aggressive in this, looks like more like the 6 or 7K, but I ended up not needing it, I guess, after I got to a certain point, so I bypassed it. Maybe have that, actually I guess I have that automated. You know what, that probably comes in a spot where I needed it, where I felt like it was poking out too much. So maybe let's look at that and see what I did there. Yeah, here we go. So the bypass. So here, yeah, on the chorus. So in the verse, I felt like it was okay, but in the choruses, she needed a little more of that control. It looks like it's probably right around, where is that at? Yeah. Right, yeah, 7K basically. So, and you see it's pretty tight on the Q too. It's not a wide, so I was kind of really trying to dig in on which thing was poking out. But automated the master bypass so that it only comes on during the choruses, and that's, we've got so much, we've got a lot of distorted instruments and guitars and things happening there. So really trying to be mindful of her not sounding too crazy in that world. Not too polished, but not too not too crunchy either, and piercy and bitey. So the verses where the rest of the instruments kind of pull back and are a little more tame, I felt like her vocal wasn't it wasn't hurting with that in there. So I automated it just for the choruses. And then for some of the treatments for her for the song, I kind of felt like this raw this vocal right here, kind of in your face. She comes in by herself. There's no instruments around her. The opening line is her by herself, and to have her hit a big reverb right off the bat for this track just didn't make sense in my mind. I didn't feel like I wanted to have it splash into a reverb and have her sound like she was in this space. I was kind of like, you know what, I want to have her be bam right here. I just wanted her right in my face, telling me what was going on. So I did some automated things with some reverbs and delays, but I started off fairly dry. I do have this this micro shift sort of on this doubler preset, which isn't real. I don't have that turned up real loud in the mix. It's down here at -20. But that adds just a little bit of extra forwardness, you know. I'm not being overly aggressive and trying to make it sound necessarily like a double. It's just giving it a little bit more of a forward feel in the mix to my ear. So
there must be something that you need.
if I take that in and out, you can maybe hear
Maybe
that.
that something is me.
Take it out.
Maybe we had too much to drink, yeah. Or maybe that's what we need.
So subtle, not overly aggressive there, but just enough to kind of push her just a hair more forward in the mix. So as far as the effects go, I think you'll hear
Following you. Tell me why you're paralyzed in place.
in that transition from the verse over to the chorus. That's when I felt like she should have some fun on the vocal, some delays and some reverb. But in the verse, I think it's basically just a very subtle
Oh,
room.
by the skin of my teeth, I am following you.
This dark vocal room preset is what she's hitting when she first comes in, and it's this is a very short decay, you know. So it's not like a big plumy, lush kind of sound. Just a little bit of space around her to make it sit in the mix just right.
There must be something that you need. Maybe that something is me. Maybe we had too much to drink, yeah. Or maybe that's what we need. Feel it in your body language. I'm following you. Oh, by the skin of my teeth, I am.
Looks like I have kind of another doubling effect on her voice as well, but once again, not so much to create like as if she sang it and doubled herself, and we're trying to put that together. These processes are more for just making her sound a little bit bigger and more forward in the mix, not meant to be a true double. So
There must be something that you need. Maybe that something is me. Maybe we had too much to drink, yeah. Or maybe
sometimes let's mute the reverb and maybe you can hear it a little bit more. These are subtle. They're not crazy.
there must be something that you need.
So that's without either
Maybe that
of the
something is me.
that's without either of the doublers.
Maybe we had too much to drink, yeah. Or maybe that's what we need. Feel it in your body language. I'm following you.
Just enough. And then a little bit more, I guess, with this one. This one has a little bit more of a chorusy vibe to it. Just sounds a little more like a chorus than a doubler, but pretty low in the mix. Just a little extra dimension on her voice. So back to transitioning from the verse into the chorus. The chorus gets big. There's a lot of energy there, and I wanted her to be in a different space. So I definitely did some automation on doing different sends to different. There's a different chorus reverb and then a chorus delay that I'm sending her to. This is the Valhalla Shimmer plugin, and I believe this is the one we're sending. Let's take a look at it. I know this is hitting, some of the backgrounds are hitting this, but I think she's hitting it also.
Following you, tell me why you're paralyzed in place. When the night falls, tell me, baby, do you feel afraid? When the night falls, come on, baby.
This is a really cool plugin, and you can do quite a bit with it. It's got this pitch mode, which I'm not using for this. There's another one that I've got for some background vocals where I am using it, so I'll go into that a little bit further when I get there. But really a nice sounding reverb and versatile and some more, I guess, creative things you can do with it. Like I said, we'll get into it in a minute. But the other part of this is this delay that I have going on with her, which is
following you. Tell me why you're paralyzed in place. When the night falls.
So one of the reasons to put on some sounds, I'll throw a reverb or delay directly on the track itself, and that's great if you're gonna keep things sort of static, have that sound or that reverb or that space on it the whole time. With delays on vocals, a lot of times what you want to do is not just throw a delay on it and have it stay at the same level the whole time. What I like to do is automate the sends, where I'm feeding some of the vocal signal into the delay and then pulling it back on other moments. So you see I've automated this send fader.
You. Tell me why you're paralyzed in place. When the night falls, tell me, baby, do you feel?
I'm trying to catch the word falls to sort of emphasize that's the chorus, that's the name of the song, Night Falls. So automating that send, if you left it up the whole time, the delay would just get so big, and so the feedback on it would just be too much and it would cloud up the mix. But you can create some of those moments by automating the send and letting it splash into a delay or a reverb only on certain sections, and then you can kind of create some moments in the song by having those automated sends go. So those happen throughout in just those spots where I wanted to kind of feature the lyric and create those moments. And then also, once again, to keep it from getting too cluttered with all this bouncy stuff going on. We've got a lot of delays happening on some of the other instruments and other things too. So once again, you can go overboard with delays sometimes and get things too washed out and too spacey. But that's kind of it for the main effects on her lead. I think I don't believe I did anything else. Once again, nothing fancy from a. If I think if I was approaching this more from like a really, clean pop mix, there might be more things to do. But once again, my mindset was more on, I want this kind of be a little more dirty, a little more raw, not quite so shiny, and just more of the rock vibe. So I also, one other thing too, this, you guys might have this, these parts here, I muted these, we tracked them, but I muted these because I wanted this dynamic change to happen right here from the verse into the chorus, and I wanted it to be a solo voice right here because I feel like the shift going from that one voice into the big chorus, that difference, that contrast makes the chorus seem that much bigger. If you already come in with a double, it's like, whoa, that vocal is big, but we haven't hit the chorus yet. So for this particular chord, the very first one out of the song, the first chorus of the song, I kind of wanted this to have a bigger impact. So I felt like by muting these two vocals here and letting this lead vocal just be by itself, as soon as the downbeat of the chorus hit, to me it just gave it a bigger impact. It was just kind of a bigger drop for the chorus. So and I think that's kind of it for the leads, or for the lead. There's a couple of overlaps, I think. This track, I believe, is it's more like an overlap track where I think we did some punching of the song, different sections. After we did the comp, I think there was a few other things that we decided, you know what, let's get that again. So we punched in a few other spots, and I think that's what these are. So for all intents and purposes, this track and this track have both been treated the same way in terms of EQ and compression and even the effects that are happening. So after that, we have some doubles on the choruses. This is, adding in the double vocal now and a triple. So you kind of got, with this vibe, you have the lead and then you've got a left and a right. So kind of three vocals hitting you on the chorus. And
You are paralyzed in place when the night falls. When the night falls, tell me, baby, do you feel afraid? When the night falls, when the night falls, come on, baby, kiss me when
for the most part, they're adding to that bigger vocal vibe as the chorus comes in now. And I treated them very similar to the lead vocal, but without the Pultec on the top, whereas the Pultec on the lead up here, I'm adding a little bit of that 8, and then here I'm not. And the only difference for that is I still want there to be a differentiation between a lead vocal and then two what I would call more like supporting vocals. They're not meant to be leads necessarily, but I want to make sure that the lead still gets the attention that it's due. And if I process these other vocals exactly the same as the lead, then it's basically kind of like I have 3 leads, and I want the focus to be on the main lead, but still have these supporting vocals on the side. So just a subtle difference in how they were treated with different plugins. For the backgrounds, we basically have a double and a triple vocal on the chorus, and these are, for the most part, they're treated very close to the way the lead is treated, with a little subtle difference, which is I didn't put this Pultec in on these. One thing I think is important is you always have a lead vocal, and I still want that to be the feature. Even if I have some supporting vocals with it, I still want there to be a differentiation between the lead vocal and then some of these supporting vocals. So if I treated everything the exact same way, if I EQ'd it, compressed it exactly, then in my mind it's always like, well, now you've got 3 leads. And that wasn't the intention for this for me. What I want to do is make sure I still keep the lead what it is, but then add these supporting vocals in as well. So just a subtle difference on the EQ treatment, but the reverbs and the delays are pretty much the same. I automated the delay on these as well, so that it hits some of those key words, some of the key lyrics. Nightfall, and some of the places where I just wanted to help create some of those moments lyrically by embellishing them with some splashes with reverb and delay. So that happens in the choruses, and once again, I kind of think of those as more like supporting vocals for around the lead. Kind of how it's just kind of how I think about it. Next we have, for the second verse, we have some additional vocals, some harmony vocals, and some moments that we created while tracking, and so I wanted to feature these in a complementary way as well. So they're kind of approached even less like leads, but they're harmony backgrounds basically. So finding the right blend for the backgrounds is one component of this. How does it fit with the lead, which is the main vocal? So
Maybe we're just caught in between. Reality.
It's kind of like a
Sweat drips.
kind of started off with one set of notes, then we have two sets of notes there, and then finally a three-part harmony. Kind of stair-step builds its way up, and so finding that that balance is kind of a matter of taste and what you think best fits the song and whatnot. So the other thing is that I process each of these individually, their own compression and de-essing and multi-brand compression, but EQ-wise, they could be a little different because they're singing different notes. These are doubles, so we have a high note which happens down the line. This gets just a roll-off of just basically everything below this point here, but the other notes are treated EQ-wise a little differently by the nature that they are actually different notes. So you're singing a different note corresponds to frequency. So for instance, this EQ is going to look different than, say, this EQ over here. Not much, but enough. The major difference, I think, on this one is sort of this, 450 area, and it's a broad stroke, but this one's a little bit lower, and it's a deeper. I'm EQing out more of this 315. So for this note, which is the low note in her harmony stack,
Maybe we're just caught in between.
there was just too much of that. But when she gets up to this next note, which happens here, definitely a higher note than the one prior to that. So EQ-wise, it didn't make a lot of sense to be dipping this 315 out necessarily. Where I heard it was higher, and she's singing higher. So this is what made the most difference in blending those notes together in that stack. So once I've got that all sitting as a group together, then I go ahead and bus them to a background aux and process them as a group. Definitely compressing them, keeping them packaged up nice and tight. But you'll notice once again, here I am with that mix at 50% on the compression. So wet versus dry. And then just adding a little bit of high end up top. This just sort of a nice, slow, steady shelf, starting at 5 and going on up. And then, the only effect that they have on them is this the tape delay, which I really like this preset on the H delay. It just kind of puts them in a little bit different sonic space, but I still liked the tape delay vibe for the aesthetic of the track, the song itself. So
Reality. Sweat drips.
it's kind of like that bouncy tape delay thing. It's kind of cool. So I think that's it. I think there was, as far as the harmonies, these accent notes, or accent vocals, I should say here, these are,
Wherever your heart beats, baby, I'm following.
so these are,
Wherever your heart beats, baby, I'm following you. Oh, when the sweat drips.
so these are down here. There's a moment where she sings the you-hoo-hoo-hoo, and I sent that out, the tail end of that. I used a send again, an automated send, to let that spill out into a delay, and that reverb, that Valhalla shimmer reverb. And so while they are the same notes, they're unison to what the main verse vocal is. We get that really cool thing where she sings up and kind of accentuates the you-hoo-hoo-hoo. And I wanted to, the you-hoo. I wanted to accentuate the you-hoo. But using the delay and the this Valhalla reverb again. So dotted eighth note delay, which is, it's bouncing back and forth, which gives you that stereo spread type thing, but then having that delay feed directly into the reverb. That's what's causing the reverb to splash. So the cool thing about this is that you've got this pitch mode. So it some of the reflections that come back to you are actually pitched up. And here I have them shifted up an octave, so they're super high. But that kind of added this really sparkly, and like the name says, the shimmer into the verb, which I really liked as she does that stair step up the note. And so I fed it into that and just let it.
Your heart beats, baby, I'm following you. Oh, when the sweat drips from.
There's just a break in the vocal there. There's nothing happening in that moment, and letting that reverb kind of fill in that space right there. I like that. So that's why I put it in there. It's kind of a pretty moment. If we're gonna make a rock song pretty, this was my way of doing it in that moment. So I think that's it for the verse backgrounds. And then I think these notes here, these are harmonies on the chorus. So those are approached with kind of the same thing in mind, that they're backgrounds, and I want them to be in the background, not featured up lead vocal style. So they're kind of processed the way I mentioned, treating backgrounds, just general housekeeping again with some compression and the de-essing. Nothing different here than what I've already shown you. Same thing on that 2 to 4K range, and a little bit of that warm area down here around the 300 hertz frequency range, and a little bit of EQ shaping, but nothing, no tricks, no fanciness on these. Just sort of getting them in the mix right, getting the balance right with them, and making sure that they do their job, which is a background harmony. So couple things left in the mix. These bridge vocals, these backgrounds that she sang on the bridge, which I really liked. The uhs and the other accent notes that she puts in. These provide that background quality, but they also give you this rhythmic component too. I like the part a lot. Kind of a cool part. And you can hear that shimmer reverb again on these. You can really hear those upper pitched up, octave up kind of vocal, those little vocal things that are happening, the little sort of pitched up reflections. And that kind of created just this space in the bridge. I just like the bridge section on this, trying to make it have its own special kind of moment within the song. So I wanted these to have kind of a unique treatment on them. She's backing herself up with these, but they also add sort of a driving element to that section of the chorus, just by the nature of their rhythmic quality. So just a little bit of compression to keep them tamed on each individual track, but then I really treated these as a component, as a group, a thing that needed to be treated uniformly. And because they're kind of almost percussive, if you will. I'm using this DBX compressor again, and I think I'm hitting it pretty hard. Yeah, almost 20 dB of compression. But here we are again. I'm really only using 40% of that. The rest of it's just dry coming through. So you still get, it brings up the tail of the uhs, even though they're short notes, but you still get a little bit of that percussive attack out of them, which I think helps reinforce that rhythmic quality in that section of the song. The de-essing, I don't know if this is really even needed all that much, but she's got a little bit of a, on some of these notes, you can see it kick in. There's a little bit of the, I don't quite know how to describe, but as she's attacking those uhs, there's a little bit of a, I don't know if it's almost like a harmonic that's hitting, that comes out. So this just pulls it down a little bit. It's not, probably could have gotten away without that, but what the heck, we're in the business of splitting hairs. So next is some overall just EQ shaping. These are sort of meant to be kind of, in my mind, they're meant to be sort of light and angelic. So really kind of rolling off a lot of that, the lows and the low mids, to just let sort of the upper frequency range come through. And then a little more sheen on top, just a 8K boost, and fairly broad on the Q. And then widening these out, even though they're all, panned, hitting them with this widener too, just creating a little bit different space. Can pop that in and out and see what it's doing. Let's go back to where she sings a little more. Here we go. Definitely comes in. You can hear it narrow without that on. It definitely spreads it out wider, and I like that too, especially since we don't have those big wide distorted electric guitars like we do on the chorus. Now these things can live out there on the outer edges, and just kind of a spatial type effect. These backgrounds are also feeding that same bus, because all of this is sort of a component. So, yeah, I think that's really why the de-esser is on here, because of the do. That there's a very much a sibilant you do. It's very very sibilant, and I think this is catching it. It's catching it on those do's. Want me, you do. Yeah. So just to keep the D from the do coming out and cracking you in the head like a hatchet. Just don't want that. And last but not least, for all the elements, are the gang vocals. And this was once again tracked using the Bloomline technique around the mics, which if you watch the tracking video, you saw that. and we stacked it several times. Nothing fancy here on this, just the concept of having these be in the background as supporting vocals, but to have that sort of wide room space, that sense of that the live room there. There's definitely a depth that just that room tone creates within the track, without necessarily having to add any extra reverb or anything like that. Let's look at one thing. I'm sending it to it looks like I am sending a little bit of reverb on this, but let's take a look at it first.
Baby, kiss me when the night falls. You'll never make it if you miss the nightfall. Come on, baby, kiss me when...
I think it's hitting the same room tone that the lead vocal is in during the verse, and not that it's necessarily needed. Let's take a look. Yeah, argue whether it really needed it or not, but I guess to my ear the addition of the space was a good blend. But that's it. Just a little bit of control on each of the 3 takes, rolling off, filtering out some of that low stuff, and then adding a little bit of harmonic content on the top. And that's it. And then just kind of finding the blend in between, how loud you want those in the track with everything else. I think these are pulled back a little bit more. They're not overly forward in the mix. So yeah, they're not overly forward in them, but you miss them when they're gone. So kind of adding a little bit of extra depth and dimension, and reinforcing the chorus lyrics.
So these backing vocals, we tuned them a bit. I think I went in and retuned them even a little bit more afterwards to get them to be really tight. I like to, for the most part, process my backing vocals together if they're all kind of doing the same thing. So we have these chorus backing vocals here. Oops, I should probably unmute my buses there. I think my buses are a little bit out of order as well.
Tear it down, build it stronger than before.
So left and right, and then there's another part that comes in here. Again, left and right.
Of this I'm sure, of only this I'm sure.
So one thing I do with panning, this is a kind of good rule for anything if you're doing a spread. You want lower stuff in the middle. Low frequencies don't have the kind of directionality that high frequencies do, so even if you do pan them, people don't hear them as well. And so it's a kind of a good idea to have your low harmonies more towards the center, and then as you get out, keep your higher ones. So I have my low harmony at almost 50, it's 46 left and right, and then my high harmony is 100 left and right. And again, there's another stack of harmonies that comes in, same thing. If you have 3 parts, you might set them 20, 50, and 100, something like that. I like to do that, it creates a spread. Some people like to go hard left, hard right with everything. Just different tastes. Some people like to keep their backing vocals more mono and less of a spread. But I put a very, very simple compressor on all of my backing vocals. This is kind of just taking the place of the compressor I should have put on when I was tracking, but that we didn't. So it's a gentle compressor, 3-to-1 ratio, just evening stuff out. You can be really aggressive actually with backing vocals. You can do some weird stuff with them and get them to sit in the mix. But every single backing vocal track has that same compressor on it. They're all getting bussed to some sort of group here. So here's this one.
Tear it down, build it stronger than before.
Now backing vocals especially, I almost never try to mix in solo. There's no point in doing that. It's how they sound with the lead vocal, and more importantly, how they sound in the whole mix. But for now, for listening purposes, let's listen to those two together.
Tear it down, build it stronger than before. Forge it from fire and build it to endure.
He's a great singer. I barely had to edit these guys. Sometimes you got to chop stuff up. Make sure your S's and T's line up. That will kill you if your S's and T's aren't lined up and the backing vocals, it just turns into a smear of a mess. He's really good. There's probably a couple here. Looks like that guy I did.
Forge it from fire.
Yeah, just lined up the timing a tiny, tiny bit. Let's hear what I did processing-wise on these guys.
Forge it from fire and build it to endure. Steal your heart.
So EQ, brightened it up a bit. I actually cut 2.7K there. That's kind of the aggressive frequency of the lead vocal. So what I'm doing there is just carving out a little bit for that lead vocal to sit in there. It's totally fine to sacrifice the sound of your backing vocal to make your lead vocal better. That's not a bad thing. So I'm kind of getting rid of an important frequency here in the backing vocals to make my lead vocal sound a little bit more on top. Also cut 820 here, probably just some mud going on. Cut some low end, aggressively cut the low end here.
Forge it from fire and build it to endure.
Compressor.
Steal your heart, if only for the fight.
Nice and gentle compressor here on my bus, just so the backing vocals as a whole don't get too aggressive. Also, when 4 parts come in, they're gonna duck down a little bit.
Of this I'm sure.
So as more voices come in, my relative level of my backing vocals is gonna stay the same because I have a compressor on the bus. More come in, the more it's gonna compress. Probably a pretty aggressive de-esser going on here. Again, to get rid of any of those issues with the S's and T's not lining up.
Tear it down, build it stronger than before. Forge it from fire and build it to endure.
Yeah, so I just don't want to hear any of those S's and T's really. Now this last guy, there is this kind of buzzy thing going on in these backing vocals that I wanted to get rid of. So I did the same thing. I swept around until I found what it was, and it was about 5K, and I kind of aggressively cut.
Tear it down, build it stronger than before. Forge it from fire and build it to endure.
Sometimes his voice just has this buzz to it, and I don't want that distracting from the lead vocal. So I'm dulling it out a little bit, just so you're not hearing that. It's not taking your ear away from the important part.
Tear it down, build it stronger than before. Forge it from fire and build it to endure.
And I'm just sending it to some of the same reverbs that the lead's going to. It looks like I'm going to the plate and one of the delays that we haven't looked at yet.
Tear it down, build it stronger than before. Forge it from fire and build it to endure. Steal your heart, if only for the fight. Tomorrow another day will come, I'm sure. Of this I'm sure. Of only this I'm sure.
Let's hear it in the mix.
Tear it down, build it stronger than before. Forge it from fire and build it to endure. Steal your heart, if only for the fight. Tomorrow another day will come, I'm sure. Of this I'm sure. Of only this I'm sure.
Nice, so they just sit there. Again, I'm paying attention to them not taking away from the lead vocal. I still want it to sound bigger than it does in the verse, which it does, but taking away little things like this buzziness or maybe some of that 2K, that is just gonna push those back a little bit so that they're not killing my lead vocal. We've got this other little backing vocal that came in here. That was really fun. So kind of the same thing that was going on with those jungle toms earlier. Did a little more aggressive processing on these to make them sound a little bit interesting.
Burning like a beacon in the night. Tell me where to run and I will not.
So I've got my same kind of processing. I got an EQ, boosting the high end, cutting the mids, keeping them sounding like backing vocals. That is not even the right bus. There we go. Cutting the low end. Here's the fun part. Distortion. Again, I love this thing. Let's listen to what these are doing. So these backing vocals needed a lot of kind of fun stuff to make them have a point in this song. We were even on the fence of even doing this. It was like, do we really need that in there? Well, let's try to make it sound cool to have a little moment. So first thing, filtered out any of that gross low end, but then this distortion really kind of thickens it up. A little bit of EQ, cutting out that low mid, the same one we did in the other one. Here's the fun one, a little bit of flanger on there. Gives it that little bit of something that sets it apart from the rest of it. And then a nice long reverb. And then I actually put a compressor after the reverb to help that tail come out even more. Really fun. Let's hear it in the mix. So it definitely sounds more aggressive when it's in solo, obviously, but it doesn't matter how it sounds in solo. It matters how it sounds in the mix. So that was a real fun thing to kind of put in there, and eventually we left it in the mix and we liked it with that kind of funky stuff all over it. All right, then we had these gang vocals that come in the bridge. Gang vocals are always fun. Trick with gang vocals, record as many as you can until people start to cry. The more you put in there, the better. You think 4 is just gonna do it, it's not. You need a crap load of them. All right, let's look at what we did here. Bust them all to one thing. So that's everyone. You can hear Morgan a lot because he's got the strongest voice, but that's the whole band singing it. We got a couple different octaves. Again, the trick with this is making stuff sound different. You don't want to sing the same thing over and over and over again. It just turns into a blurry mess. So it's kind of weird. Sometimes you got to convince people to go into like some characters, like sing like a jock, sing like a girl, sing like this, sing like that. The more you put in there, the better. So we've got a couple different voices, a couple different octaves in there. But again, this is not as big as it needs to sound. We need this to sound big and epic. So we put, first things first, that big reverb on there. I like this reverb for these kinds of things. The same one I used on those jungly toms. It's bright and it's bold. It does not sound like you're putting it in a natural space. It's kind of above and beyond that. So it's, for this kind of thing, it's really nice. EQ. Just brightening it up, getting rid of some of the mud. With that many voices on there, you tend to get a buildup in this low mid, so cutting a little bit of that 390 and just a little bit of air on top. And then the fun one, the compressor. This is gonna make the reverb pop out more since it's inserted after the reverb. Plus, it's gonna make this whole thing sound kind of a little bit gnarlier. Let's hear it in the mix. Really fun. Again, when you listen to it in solo, that processing sounds really aggressive. And then when you hear it in the mix, it's, oh, that's not as gnarly as I thought it was going to be. So if you did want to make it sound gnarlier, you'd have to overdo that processing. Looks like we just have another backing vocal at the end. I'm sure this is same, going to the same bus.
Sure of this, I'm sure.
Yep, just a third voice. All right, so it gets the same processing as everything else.